Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you. Hope you all are doing very well and keeping safe from the virus. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on early career fellowships in basic biomedical research. I am Himashri and I am your host for today. I work at DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, and I will be taking you through the webinar today. So before we begin, let me quickly give you an introduction to what DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance is. For short, we call it India Alliance, which is an independent and dynamic public charity that funds research in health and biomedical sciences in India. India Alliance invests in transformative ideas and supportive research ecosystems to advance discovery and innovation to improve health and well-being. This is funded by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and the Wellcome Trust from UK. You can find out more about many such programs or workshops by visiting our website at indiaalliance.org. You can also follow us on social media through some of the handles that will be displayed on screen now. A few housekeeping pointers that I would like to tell you about before we start the program today. Firstly, the program is being recorded now. So if any of your friends, colleagues are missing this session, they can always follow the webinar through the recording, which we will be posting up on the India Alliance YouTube channel within a day. So within a day or two, soon after the webinar. You can during the program sessions, while the sessions are going on, if you have any questions for our speakers, you can leave them in the question box and we'll address them one by one later. Please make sure that the question only relates to the topic at hand being covered in the webinar. In case there is some technical glitch which leads to the webinar ending abruptly, please use the same link that has been registration link that has been given to you for joining back within a minute. We look forward to your feedback after the webinar, and we hope you will fill out the feedback form so that we can have we can improve our webinars for future. And now on your screens, you will see the agenda for today's webinar. You can see that right now we are at the welcome session part of the webinar. The first session will be taken by Dr. Rahul Dutta, who is an India Alliance from the India Alliance grants team. Now, secondly, we'll have two early career fellows from our fellows team who will be speaking about their experiences, and then we'll go to grant writing where Professor Manuel will be talking to us about how to write a grant for ECF and many other such fellowships. And then that will be followed by the dedicated question and answer session where we take you through the questions that you have posted or any other questions that may come to your mind, whatever you have posted in the panel, and we'll take you through them as much as possible within the 30 minutes we have. If needed, we may extend the program for additional 10 minutes. So now we move on to the first session, which is on the India Alliance Career Fellowship Scheme, about which we'll be talking today. So we'll be introduced to the fellowship by my colleague, Dr. Rahul Dutta. Let me introduce Rahul to you. He's a veterinarian by training and a biologist by choice. Rahul holds a BVSc and AH in veterinary medicine from the Assam Agricultural University, an MBSc in Animal Biotechnology from the National Dairy Research Institute, and a PhD in Biological Science from Technische Universität München. Rahul is a recipient of the prestigious DART Fellowship offered by the German Academic Exchange Service, where he pursued his PhD from the Technische Universität. He completed his postdoctoral training at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in the Faculty of Agriculture in Rehovot. His research focus was on developing transgenic animal models using designer nucleases like CRISPR-Cas9. He is currently working as a grants advisor at the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, and he will be speaking to you about the Early Careers Fellowship Scheme now. Over to you, Rahul.
Yeah, thanks, Himasri, for the kind introduction. And I welcome all the participants to this event today. Let me start. So, is my screen visible to you? I hope.
Rahul,
It is. So, good afternoon to everyone, and I welcome you all again to this ECF's Basic Biomedical Research webinar. Through this webinar, we'll try to walk you through the different steps of applying to the ECF fellowship, and we'll try to help you navigating different steps through different lectures and scheduled for today. So first things first, my colleague Himashri has already mentioned about the organization, how India Alliance functions. So without going into that, basically we are a funding agency. We fund research into two broad categories: basic biomedical research and clinical and public health research. So based on the stage of career stage of a researcher, we have three subdivision of our schemes. For example, early career fellowship is designed to launch researchers into their career trajectory, and then intermediate fellowship is for establish mid-senior researcher into their trajectory, and senior fellowship is meant for even senior people to project them into leadership position. So the genesis of early career fellowship is because there was a felt need that researchers at that stage needs a lot of hand holding and the kind of opportunities that should be available to prosper them into independent researchers, where research career was not there at the time of launch. So ECF was launched as a mentored postdoc program where young researchers would be given the first taste of independence with generous funding and great mentorship network. So this is early career fellowship genesis for you. Let's go and see who are the people who or the aspirant who are eligible to apply. So the eligibility criteria, anyone who is into last year of PhD and up to 4 years of post PhD experience is eligible, and PhD in any discipline of science. So as long as the proposed research is biomedical research work that has implication to human and animal welfare, we do not give importance to the background. So the idea is the research proposal should be within the remit of our program, that is that has implication to human and animal welfare, and PhD could be from any discipline, and within 4 years of post PhD or last year of PhD, one is eligible. And of course, the fellowship is for not for profit institutions in India, so it has to be undertaken in Indian geographical boundaries. So there are options of availing foreign visits also. We will learn about it in due course of time. So the key provisions, early career fellowship scheme has been a really attractive scheme for among our different schemes, because it comes with very generous funding and great amount of flexibility. This is peerless when you compare with it with many other contemporary schemes run by different agencies. It is probably the most generous in terms of research funding and personnel support. So the duration is up to 5 years, total budget is up to 1.7 crores, and personnel support would be 10.36 lakh as it stand today. There is a provision of even requesting support staff starting from second year of fellowship. And one very attractive feature of this fellowship is work outside host institute. So there is a Indian host institute that would be the primary host institute of the fellow, but there is the option of choosing a lab outside India or within India also. But if it is outside India, one can avail up to 2 years of stay there. So there would be overseas subsistence allowance up to $3,000 and a travel cost of one-time travel cost that usually include to and fro airfare of 1,50,000. And apart from this, there is a travel allowance of 7.5 lakhs to cover for any other travel during these 5 years, and contingency of 2.5. So time commitment required, as it is a the uh, uh, as it is a mentored program, so we have a strict commitment rule that most of the time, that is nearly 100% of the time, if there is no faculty position with the fellow, he or she needs to devote 100% of the research time into our project, and at least 90% if he or she has a faculty position. So with these, I believe that these different features like the budget makes it very attractive for a lot of the applicants. So let's talk about the fellowship application cycle. This is important because the India Alliance cycle is very unique in the Indian ecosystem. Preliminary application is the first stage of the application, where most of the attendees, you are probably in the stage of applying for submitting the preliminary application. It is the phase where we ask for the CV, your career trajectory, the publications, and along with the research proposal that you want to work on. This is an idea. This stage is to assess the competitiveness of the applicant. So once preliminary application is submitted, this goes through an internal triage. Very rigorous triage is done at this stage, and subsequently, based on the competitiveness of the cohort, we select a set of applications for full application. So full applications would be invited. So invite only these are invite only after screening through the preliminary application. And once the full applications is submitted, there is a resubmission policy that I will come back to you in a little while. The full applications will be sent out for international peer review. This is again another unique feature of India Alliance Fellowship in the Indian context, that we do international peer review of all the submitted applications. So certain number of nearly 100% of the applications, a certain number of reviews would be from international researcher based out of India. So reason being is that we'd like to make it very fair and avoid conflict of interest. Many a time we approach Indian reviewers also, which their work is of international standard. So it's not about the geography, but the quality of research work that also plays into here. And upon the peer review, once they come back from the peer review, we have a selection committee, and then it goes into the shortlisting stage. From all the applications that we receive at the full application stage, after peer review, a shortlisting committee will shortlist few of those applications with the highest number of peer review rating, and they will be taken forward for the interview. Then the selection committee will finally invite the shortlisted applications for the interview. So that is the penultimate, that is the final interview. That will be up in good old times, that used to be a physical interview. Now for the last 2 seasons we are conducting it virtually, but this is the real interview. And eventually, if the selection committee recommends the application for an award, the fellowship is awarded. So there are two things here. If you have seen it, the resubmission policy, would like to emphasize that please read our resubmission policy. The policy states that if an application is taken to, invited for a full submission, and it is submitted, and eventually it is whatever the outcome may be selected, then the award is awarded. If not selected, after that there is no possibility of reapplying into the same scheme. So after full application stage, if an application is fails to get to the award stage, there is no possibility of reapplying to the same scheme. Of course, a candidate can apply to any higher scheme or other schemes, but the same scheme, it is not possible. So that is our resubmission policy. So it is important to time the application that way, to think for candidates who are really fresh into their after PhD stage, maybe is it good enough if you think the application is very competitive, then only we recommend the application, or you need to think if it is the right time to apply, because you may lose a valuable chance, or you may consider waiting for another yes, year or so to make it more competitive. So that is something that you need to consider. And dual policy, fellowship policy, we do not allow, it's self-explanatory, we do not allow anyone to have two fellowships at a time. So in order to avail India Alliance ECF fellowship, one has to give up any existing fellowship. So that's how it works. So under no circumstances will allow dual fellowships. Two fellowships cannot be availed at the same time. So roles of the application, this is very important, and these roles are very strict, as in there are please note the terminologies, and it is unequivocal, so there is no other interpretations, or you cannot add anyone outside these roles. So lead applicant would be a person who is the application, you are the lead applicant in your application. And fellowship supervisor, for ECF competition, it is mandatory to have a fellowship supervisor. Your supervisor is will provide you the host lab and other necessary guidance to throughout your throughout the proposed project duration, and it is a mandatory rule in your case. And there has to be at least one additional letter of recommendation from a person who knows your scientific credential, who knows you well enough. So could be your PhD supervisor, could be a postdoc supervisor also, but technically there has to be a support letter from fellowship supervisor, and there has to be a letter of recommendation from someone other than the fellowship supervisor. So these two roles are mandatory at this, and letter of recommendation could be more than one also, depending on whoever you want to approach the recommendation for recommendation. So it is not restricted to one, could be more than one also. And the sponsor usually is a person who is a senior researcher in the host lab, or could be a head of the department or director of the institute, who will ensure that you get the necessary support, and who will undertake the responsibility of ensuring that you will be accommodated in the host lab and the host institute. So sponsor again is a mandatory role in case of a full application. So this is the preliminary application stage that we are talking now. So if you haven't identified a sponsor at this stage, this is well and good, but if invited for the full application, this role would be mandatory. Again, for mentor, so we emphasize that at this early stage mentorship is of paramount importance. So mentor is anyone with this experience and scientific credentials, who will guide you throughout the research project, and also guide you in the path of independence in future. So as a whole, it's as the name suggests, it will be a role that will guide you through the project, scientific project, as well as your overall growth as a researcher and overall career. So this role is mandatory, again, not now. If you want to add a mentor, it is mandatory in full application stage. and then comes external sponsor. So external sponsor, if you remember in the provision, I have mentioned about work outside host institute. So external sponsor is will be the scientist who is working at that host institute, external host, the external host institute that is that you want to if you opt for an external host institute, this will be the person, scientist in contact. So external sponsor, if you opt for this work outside host institute, then this role is mandatory. And then collaborator could be anyone with the scientific expertise, or who can offer you expertise and other support during your research. So what is important is that if you add there are, if you see lead applicant, you being the lead applicant, fellowship supervisors, and supervisor who will provide you letter of recommendation, sponsor mentor, these are mandatory roles. External sponsor, you can opt for WOHI, and collaborators, usually you can opt to have collaborators based on your requirement. But once you add a role into your application, so a letter of support becomes mandatory. So please be mindful of that. So if you add someone as a collaborator, the person, he or she, has to support, give you a support letter as a collaborator or external sponsor. So be mindful of that. So what are the salient features of India Alliance Fellowship? So these are not in any particular order, but what stands out is that it's an extremely flexible and generous funding, uh, because India Alliance, the ethos of work is to support and nourish young researchers. So we offer, except for the funding, also we offer a very flexible nurturing environment to make you independent in your research trajectory. Due regard to non-research career break, let's take the flexible example here. And as I have mentioned in the first slide, it's second slide itself, eligibility, the 4-year post PhD, the candidate has to be within that period. But in case someone has taken a non-research career break, for example, someone has taken say 6 months career break due to a personal reason, could be some other kind of reasons, or someone has joined a non-research career, could be an industry career or administrative career, so that time will be deducted, say for example 6 months. So eventually, if someone has exceeded the eligibility limit by few weeks, but he or she has taken a non-research career break, we will give the discount to make it make the candidate eligible with due regard to the non-research career break. That way we are very flexible. So in no circumstances, someone, say for example, has exceeded 4 years 10 days, in no circumstances that 10 days would be considered a big issue here. That probably won't be the reason for, if otherwise the candidate is very competitive, that 10 days addition won't be the reason for denial. So there is no restriction based on age or nationality. Although the research has to be carried out in India, someone, a foreign researchers with a different passport is also eligible to apply for this fellowship. And emphasis is on the lead investigator. It is the lead investigator's potentials and career that we put the maximum emphasis on. So it doesn't have to be, you do not have to be from a premier institute to be eligible or to have a good shot at the fellowship. If your idea is strong, your career trajectory is promising, please feel free to apply. We give maximum emphasis on that. And during the fellowship application process, we provide continuous feedback of your applications. Upon peer review, arrival of the peer review report, we also share the feedback with them in due course of time. So there, apart from that, there is no requirement of a salaried position or commitment towards any position here. In some of the fellowships, at least there is a condition that one has to be a permanent employee of a certain government organization. These kind of requirements do not apply to our fellowship. So that way, again, we are very flexible. And encouragement to pursue interdisciplinary science. So in our case, it depends on your research project that you want to pursue, but we always encourage people to go beyond their comfort zone and collaborate and pursue interdisciplinary research. There is always great opportunity to develop international collaboration. Again, bringing this work outside host institute, you can consider it as an inbuilt international postdoc opportunity in our ECF fellowship, where we will give out a scholarship of up to $3,000 for 2 years. So that is really remarkable and unique in our fellowship scheme. And international fellow peer review, I have already mentioned about it. Every application go through an international peer review at the peer review stage, and again at the shortlisting stage also. Our panel comprises of internationally renowned scholars of Indian or both Indian and people based out of India, scholars based out of India. So that way we review the applications internationally as per the best practices. And one of the key feature is that everything is done through a online secure platform. It is called ISIS. I will talk about the ISIS platform, and it is important for your preliminary application as well. So let's see. I'll talk about it in a minute. So as of now, the preliminary applications are open, and this the deadline is 31st August 2021 and 2 p.m. So rest won't be very important at this stage. So one fixed deadline is the fellowship start date. This round, if awarded, one can start the fellowship earliest by 1st January 2023. So please be mindful of the application submission deadline, because we do not consider request to postpone it, and we do not consider late submission. So we are very strict about this bit. And yes, this is the console of our India Alliance system. This is the application submission system that you are going to use. And there is a possibility to create an account. Many of you already probably have created your own account, but I would like to emphasize here is that whatever rule your fellowship supervisor or your supervisor added to give a recommendation letter, will have to access your application or submit the requested letter through this portal only. So there is no way of sending the application as a attachment to our email. So we do not accept it. We accept only documents submitted to your grant through this portal. So please be careful and please convey it to your prospective fellowship supervisors and mentors, or maybe the supervisors recommend providing you recommendation letter that this letter has to be submitted through the ISIS portal. So one important thing to consider here is that I already mentioned that we do not give any leeway to deadline of submission. So please coordinate well in advance, because in order to successfully submit your application, your fellowship supervisor and your supervisor giving you the recommendation letter has to upload the letter and submit it and then approve it. Then only your submission will be complete. So this process needs a bit of coordination. So please plan well in advance. It is not advisable to wait till the very last day, because the technical glitches and it has to be done through the ISIS or India Alliance system. So please plan that in mind. If you have questions, face any problem, definitely you can write to us with this ID, grants@indiaalliance.com or info@indiaalliance.com. These contact IDs would be reflected to you in a moment. Yeah. So for more information, please visit and read about the fellowship scheme at this ID, and any queries, you please feel free to write to us at info@indiaalliance.org. We'll get back to you at the earliest. And do not forget that the deadline of preliminary submission is 31st August 2021, 2 p.m. IST. And we'd like to receive your application well within this deadline, and we look forward to you know uh, seeing you in the final stage as well. So with these, I conclude my presentation, and in a while we will also have a Q&A round. If you have questions, we will address them one by one once the Q&A session begins. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul, for touching on all the important parts of the fellowship process. I could see that many of our questions have already been answered in the due course of your discussion. So now we move on to our second session. So, Rituraj, we have with us two speakers for this session. The first one is Dr. Rituraj Marwaha, an early career fellow. So far you have listened to the parts from the India Alliance office who took us through the process. Now we'll hear through her about how she went for the process. So let me introduce you to Rituraj. She did her bachelor's in biochemistry from Punjab University, Chandigarh, and post her graduation, she joined IISER Mohali for the integrated MS PhD program in biology. She then did her PhD work in the laboratory of Dr. Mehak Sharma at IISER Mohali. After completing her PhD, she has now joined the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Hyderabad and is working with organelle dynamics in the context of collective cellular processes. She received her India Alliance Early Career Fellowship in the year 2020, and she will now be speaking about her experience. Over to you, Rituraj.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Himashri, for such a kind introduction. So, yeah, today in my talk, I will be talking about my pre-award journey here with all of you. So, just after I had completed my PhD, I joined TIFR Hyderabad as a postdoctoral fellow, and I was looking for some independent research funding options. And I decided to apply for the India Alliance Early Career Fellowship because, as you all know, it is one of the most prestigious fellowships that is there in India, and it is the one that provides generous research funding opportunity. And apart from this, I have previously been fortunate to have worked with an India Alliance funded fellow, and also currently I'm working with someone who is funded by India Alliance. And I know that this India Alliance provides an excellent platform for forming a great network and collaborations, which are an integral part of the scientific career as such. Apart from this, I thought that getting such a fellowship would be a great boost to my scientific career, and it would also help me in developing skills which would be important in running an independent research facility in the future. At the first stage, or to begin with, one has to submit a preliminary application. And here at this stage, one needs to identify a supervisor, host institution, and a mentor. In my case, my supervisor and host institution were kind of decided as I was already working as a postdoctoral fellow. And my research interest aligns with the host lab, and my host institution provides me the liberty to perform interdisciplinary research, which is kind of the basis of my research proposal. As far as choosing a mentor goes, I wanted someone who was an expert in the field that would provide and so that he or she could provide critical insights into my research. And also I wanted the mentor to be someone who was at an advanced stage of his or her career, so that that person can help me or guide me through my journey of becoming an independent researcher as such. At this stage, one has to give a research proposal of what one would be doing if one is get this fellowship. So while I was chalking out the research question, I was interested in doing something that will create a novel niche for myself, and I would benefit the maximum out of the expertise of my host lab or my fellowship supervisor's expertise. So to prepare for this draft, I had several rounds of discussions, brainstorming sessions, and I went through revising this draft again and again with my fellowship supervisor and my mentor to come up with the version that I submitted eventually. Feedback on my writing, I took feedback from people within my field and outside my field, and that helped me a lot in compiling a very concise, well put through a draft as such. After the preliminary application, once I got a call for submitting a full application, I was supposed to submit. We are supposed to submit a detailed proposal. One thing that I was very particular about and I did was to start working early on the full application. I penned down all my thoughts and began drafting the application. So why did starting early helped? Because it gave me a lot of time to do multiple rounds of edits and to come up with the best possible version of the draft that I eventually submit. And also it gave me some time to test my hypothesis and generate some kind of preliminary data that would support my hypothesis and my application as such. So apart from submitting a detailed proposal, the full application also consisted of planning our research timeline and planning our budget. So basically, we have to put what experimental plans do we have and how much, what all do we wish to achieve in this given amount of time, and how are we going to allocate these funds that when we can ask from India Alliance fellowship as such. So for this, my fellowship supervisor and my mentor helped me a lot with fund allocation as to how to allocate these funds in different categories, and they helped me in setting up a realistic research timeline as such. So the most critical and the last part of this whole process was the interview. So during the time of the interview, we were in the middle of a global pandemic, and it was probably the first time we were having an online interview session for India Alliance Early Career ECF. So for this, we had to prepare a 5-minute oral presentation with no visual cues. So for this, what I did was I drafted a script of what I was going to say in these 5 minutes, and I made sure that I had put all, I was able to convey every key message that I wanted my interviewing panel to hear about. And I arranged my script in such a way that I briefly introduced the topic. Then I came to the key question that I'm going to propose. What was my research plan? And if I had any preliminary results, I talked about those results. Then I talked about the timeline about how am I going to do, uh, how much I'm going to achieve in in a given set of time. And since I have opted for the WOHI option, I also talked about my research plan at the WOHI host lab, and I mentioned about the collaborations at that time which I was planning, which are going to help me in my research eventually. And I ended the talk by talking about how this fellowship is going to help me and what are my long-term future scientific goals as such. So the interview as such was a very good experience for me. After my oral presentation, I had a great, healthy discussion with the panelists, and I'm really, and it gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of insights into my proposal. And whenever I had any doubt at any stage of the application, I got back to the India Alliance team, and they were very supportive in answering all my queries. Overall, the whole process of applying to this fellowship was amazing, and it gave me a lot of confidence in my research proposal, and it taught me about how major grants work uh, actually. So I would like to end with this. uh, Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in the Q&A session.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rituraj, for taking us through your journey and your experience. I believe it will benefit the people who are going to apply now. So now we move to the next fellow we have with us, who is Dr. Shankar Manoharan. Doctor, let me introduce you to him. Dr. Manoharan was awarded the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance Early Career Fellowship in 2017 to study the regulation of virulence in the hospital-associated pathogen Klebsiella pneumoniae. He is passionate about microbes, microbial communities, and their workings. He currently leads the microbial physiology group at the Department of Bioscience and Bioengineering, IIT Jodhpur. Dr. Shankar holds a master degree in genomics and a PhD in microbiology from Madurai Kamraj University. And post PhD, he pursued 3 years of postdoctoral training at the University of Kansas Medical Center, Kansas City in USA. His group is also interested in studying the human gut microbiota in the context of health and disease. I will now hand the screen over to Dr. To Shankar, who will take you through his journey in with the India Alliance Fellowship. So over to you, Shankar.
Thank you, Mashri, for that kind invitation. I hope my screen is visible. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Himashi, again for that nice introduction. So I'd like to begin with a brief intro into the reasons why I believe you should apply for this fellowship. I believe that the India Alliance and the ECF scheme itself is a very fellow-centric organization and scheme where all the requests and the demands of the fellows are prioritized very much. This is one thing that actually makes India Alliance stand apart. In addition to that, the funding that is received is extremely generous in terms of amount, and there are very few schemes in India which can actually match the quantum of funding that is awarded by the India Alliance. It's not just about the amount of funding, it's also about the flexibility that we have with spending the money as to where it might be required. You have a certain level of flexibility in the utilization of the transferable funds, which comes in very handy, especially when things change quite quickly. And if at all we do run into some issues along the way, the India Alliance staff are extremely approachable and supportive and are always around to help us if anything goes wrong. I also want to touch a little bit upon the application process in itself, which is extremely comprehensive and I would say intensive, because at the postdoc level, you normally don't really expect to have a plan for data management or data sharing, which was required as part of the application. And it kind of is a learning experience in itself, the application process. And finally, India Alliance also does a lot of activities to nurture the professional growth of their fellows. I'll detail a little bit about that in subsequent slides. A little bit of how we got here. So I got back to India in 2017, at which point I had started applying to a lot of academic and research institutes in India, as well as to different funding schemes, including the Early Career Fellowship. Fortunately, I was selected for an interview and subsequently was also recommended for an award in 2017. And I followed up and started and activated my grant at the IT Vellore, which was my proposed host institution. Just about a month along the way, I learned that I was being considered for an assistant professor position at IIT Jodhpur. And at this point, I did follow up and attend the interview, and I did mention to the committee that I have an active ECF grant, and I'm sure that that must have influenced their decisions because I did get offered for a position here at IIT Jodhpur. And once I got here, accepting the position was kind of tricky for me because I was worried if I'll be able to take the grant with me. And this was made seamlessly possible by the efforts of the grants team as well as the finances team, who took care of all of the policies were already in place for the transition. And all I had to do was to just follow the instructions of the corresponding teams, which led me to start up my independent group in IIT Jodhpur in 2018. So once I got here, things started getting a little difficult because all my planning was for my fellowship to be conducted at VIT Vellore in another person's laboratory which was fully equipped. But here, as an assistant professor, I was also expected by the institute to start up my own lab and to establish my own group. So the funding, the flexible funding policy of India Alliance actually came in quite handy here. So I could actually request for approvals to purchase certain minor equipments, although I had not proposed them in the grant. The whole structure of the India Alliance Fellowship is built on feedback and support. You have, for scientific support, you have multiple mentors on your application, collaborators, supervisors, all of whom you can turn to in case there are any issues along the way. And of course, the senior fellows of India Alliance are also very approachable and are very willing to help in case of feedback on your application or during the progress of your research work. On the non-scientific front, India Alliance has a great grant advisor as well as a grant management team and a finance team. And the finance team often even conducts webinars on how to fill up their grant spend reports, which all are extremely helpful in running the grant as an early career PI. India Alliance, at least for me, has always been about building professional networks. They have an annual fellows meeting, which I was fortunate to attend, the one in Delhi. So it's a one-of-a-kind meeting because the best minds in country are there, and it's a great opportunity to share and exchange ideas. I was also nominated, fortunate to be nominated to attend the annual Deltas Africa meeting in Dakar in Senegal in 2019. These meetings have always served as a platform to exchange a lot of ideas and forge collaborations and do better science, which I believe is the ultimate goal of India Alliance, to improve the science ecosystem in India. For me, at least, I forged 2 or 3 collaborations through these meetings, and they're now approaching funding, additional funding to pursue a collaborative research course. On the professional development front, India Alliance, as Rahul mentioned in his presentation, reserves some money for you to spend on travel to meetings. And in addition, they also co-organize certain training workshops, webinars, and programs which will be extremely useful for early career fellows. I was fortunate enough to be selected to attend an EMBO Lab leadership course early this year. So overall, the India Alliance Fellowship kind of contributes to the well-rounded development of an independent researcher. It's not just about good science, it's also about communicating good science. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to outreach by the India Alliance, which I am continuing independently now. So we had a great Explorer series where we had India Alliance fellows talking to school students here at IIT Jodhpur. And we also had a couple of days on science communication, manuscript writing, and leadership skills, all managed and organized by the communications and the grants team, with us just providing on-site support. So overall, I would like to conclude by saying that being an India Alliance Fellow is an experience in itself, and I invite all of you to enjoy this experience. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to the organizers for having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shankar, for taking us through your journey and how your unique experiences and how India Alliance Fellowship helped you with it. So I believe people will be more clear about the fellowship now. So now we will be moving to our next talk. Let us welcome Manuel Salmeron-Sanchez, who is he also the member and deputy chair of the ECF selection committee and the head of the division of biomedical engineering and chair of biomedical engineering in the school and the University of Glasgow. Before joining the University of Glasgow in 2013, Manuel was also the full professor at Technical University of Valencia and visiting professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology in 2010. In 2012, he was seconded to Abegonia Research, a research company within Abegonia, an international company with more than 20,000 employees, to set up the materials research division. He has a wide number of publications, grants, and researchers to his name. Without further ado, I would like to invite him to share his ideas and experiences, and also about to take you through the grant writing process for the ECF fellowship. Over to you, Manuel.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Thanks for the introduction. I'll contribute from my perspective to how as a reviewer and as a committee member we see and we assess this fantastic application that we received for the Early Career Fellowship. I wanted to highlight that this is a work done by an international panel where the colleagues really go through the different applications in detail, and is really a challenging process and project to discriminate which applications are funded and which are not funded. The quality is very high. From my perspective, just not to go directly into how I think applications are written and giving you the perspective of a reviewer and a committee member. I'm based in Glasgow, the University of Glasgow. We're in the north of the United Kingdom in Scotland, a very green city, a very beautiful city as well. If you have had the opportunity to visit it, you know it. If not, it's a very green area of the UK because it rains even more than the average raining that we have in the UK. It's a very old university in Glasgow. It's the third oldest university in the English-speaking world and has contributed to science and technology, in particular to biomedical sciences, with a number of discoveries. I'm not going to go through all the highlights or all the landmarks, but many of the important clinical approaches that are followed nowadays come from research that was done in Glasgow the last 100 years, perhaps. My own activity is very multidisciplinary. I sit at the interface between bioengineering and biology, and I'm part of a department that is the Center for the Cellular Microenvironment that is actually a link between the two colleges in Glasgow, the College of Medical, Veterinary and Life Sciences and the College of Science and Engineering. And this, I think it is useful because it gives me a broad perspective, a broad multidisciplinary perspective that can be used to assess applications, grant applications from different backgrounds. So I've been on the Early Career Fellowship Committee since 2017, almost 5 years now, more than 5 years. I have the privilege to be deputy chair of the committee since last year. And basically what we do is to review and score proposals. We do recommendations for shortlisting for interviews. And then we go in detail through the proposals with the candidates during the interviews. Okay? It's quite a lengthy process that starts early in the year, and then it finishes with a decision of which grants are funded and which grants are not funded, which is always difficult. So the key question there is the $1 million or £1 million or million of the currency that you want to question is how to write a good proposal. And I can give you my perspective and the perspective of the panel, what we look into the proposals that are funded. And I think there are basically 3 aspects of them that need to be highlighted. First is that the proposal has to reflect excellent science, and preferentially, I know that this is not possible for all fields of biomedical sciences, but it should be hypothesis driven. Okay, and this has primarily 3 aspects. Why why is this a problem that you want to focus on over the next 5 years? What is the novelty of the problem? Novelty is not the only aspect, because I mean a problem can be novel but not very important. So why should we care about this problem, even if it's very fundamental or very basic science? So what is the potential impact of this research that you want to do? And also, what is your personal contribution? What is your vision for the idea in the context of the field? How your own research is going to provide something different to a field that many times have many contributors? What is different? So excellent science, hypothesis-driven, focus on these aspects. Then it's important that your application reflects that this is your idea, that you have contributed yourself to the development of the fellowship, that this is not just an example, one idea of your supervisor or your PhD supervisor or someone else that is helping with your application. There is a subtle but important difference between having support from your supervisor and your mentor that has to be there to write your proposal versus the whole proposal is their idea and you're just writing it. And that has to be very clear, reflected in your application. And for that, it's important that if you have any preliminary data from your previous work supporting your hypothesis, that there is place in the proposal to include that data. And finally, how you write your application. Okay, the application is important that your proposal is carefully written. There are many different sections. I will go through them quickly in a minute. But you need to show that you have put care in writing your application that is easy to follow, that can be understood by people who are scientists, but in biomedical scientists, but they maybe are not 100% into your field. So it has to be writing has to be simple, very clearly focused, and ideally you want to have your reviewer engaged. You don't want them to get bored from the beginning. So something that is important to highlight, because this is an early career fellowship and is about plagiarism. That is, of course, not tolerated in any form, but one has to be careful what we mean by plagiarism, because it's not just to copy work that has been published elsewhere in the literature. You have to be also careful on how what you write in your proposal, you are not copying yourself. So self-plagiarism is something that you need to be careful as well. Okay, and sometimes this is done without noticing, just by lack of experience. But you have, as I said, people supporting your writing. The application is complex, it's long. It has many different sections. I'll tell you what we think. I mean, the vision as a committee, as a panel, including my own perspective. So the title is important. It has to be a good description of the grant, but ideally you don't want to write a title that has 3 lines and is almost a summary of the grant. Okay, it has to be descriptive and interesting. The project summary is I would say is very, very important, because it's the first page that is actually read in the application. And yeah, there you have to highlight what is your research question, what is the summary of your project, and also the summary of your project for the lay reader, for someone, as I said, that might not be fully 100% into your field. It's important that this is very clearly written, that people from different backgrounds can understand it, and it's a good way to have your reviewer excited about what is coming in the proposal. Okay, so you have this cartoon of the bored reviewer versus the engaged reviewer. You want your reviewer to be engaged, even if he is not in your field. Then there is a very important section that is the proposal. What are you going to do in your project? Okay, what are the aims of your project, which is the work that has led to this project, the methodology and experimental design, a flow chart. This is, as I said, probably the most important part of the application. An opportunity to show that you can clearly explain what you want to do, your experimental design, so that people can follow it. If there is any novel approach in your experiment, in your methodology, it's a good way to highlight it, and also to demonstrate that the proposal is feasible. That is basic research that you, with your experience, with your background, you can actually carry out. References are also important, because they show how much you know your field and how much you really are into what you are writing. So you need to pay attention to which references you include. In particular, if there are references in the field that show contradictions, it's an opportunity to highlight that, to show that you are going to contribute to solve a contradiction in the field, or that your approach is going to clarify an aspect that you show clearly with references that is under a strong discussion in the literature. And the application allows to have additional data. So it's an opportunity to provide up to 5 pages, which is a lot, of data supporting your idea. And it's important that you think about what do you want to include, what kind of images, figures, tables you want to include supporting your proposal. The second aspect that is very important is also who you are, your CV, because basically there are a number of sections to include in the application about your CV, but we want to see that you have actually done good science before. Most of the time this is during your PhD or a little bit of postdoctoral experience, okay, that you have the ability and the skills to deliver good papers, good science. And also that you have the potential to be independent, that you have the potential to think independently of the labs where you have been doing your research. I know that this is tricky to sometimes to explain into a CV, but there are ways that you can provide highlights. I mean, if there is a publication where maybe you are not the first author, but you still have a strong contribution, and you have done something that without that contribution, the paper wouldn't be the paper that it is at the moment that was published. It's an opportunity to write a couple of sentences about each one of the publications, what's been your contribution, and why that was important. And then it's been discussed previously that the supervisor is very important. Who is going to be your supervisor? Why have you chosen this supervisor? And what's the role that your supervisor is going to play in not just during the development of your project in these 5 years, but also if they have had the time to contribute from the beginning during the writing of the proposal, because that's something that should happen, and that will only strengthen the proposal. So that's important. The host institution also has been mentioned. Why this host institution? Why is this the best place to do your science? What kind of infrastructure, labs, how are they going to support your progression to independence? In essence, we want to see that you have had some thoughts about why this host institution, that's important. Mentors are not just a supervisor. I mean, it's been discussed already, are very important for the early career fellowship. Why these mentors and what are they going to provide? And this might be, for example, that they have technical skills that you don't have, and they are going to contribute with these technical aspects of the proposal, or they are going to provide support in your career development or other aspects of your career, but there must be a rationale behind why these mentors. And it has been mentioned also today that the fellowship provides an opportunity to work outside your host institution. And I think we, as a panel, we like when candidates make use of this, because it shows that they really are hungry for understanding what's been done in the field in other areas, in other countries, in other labs, how having a different vision of their project can help increase the quality of the science that they do. It doesn't mean that if you don't have work outside your host institution, your grant can't be funded. That's not the case. I mean, your grant is perfectly eligible and can be perfectly funded without this. But sometimes there are other places where you can go and do some additional work that is going to really give that additional level of extra quality to your research. And we like when that happens. So it's important to think carefully if you need that in your proposal. Your application might or might not include human participants and experiments on animals. And even if having ethics approval is not required at the submission stage, this only has to be clear at the award stage. For the application, it's important that you justify if you need animals, why is that, or human samples, that you have power studies, that you have all the statistics, that you have considered the 3 Rs, etc. is important to give a strong rationale on why is this needed. Data management is also equally important. It's not just an administrative section. How are you going to share your data, not just in publications, but if someone wants to have access to your raw data, is that going to be possible? And if not, why not, etc. So some thoughts are needed also about data management. And finally, an aspect that I think in many applications is, since this is primarily to get funding for basic science, people think that in many occasions that there is no commercial exploitation. But I think it's an opportunity to reflect also and to think how your basic research is going to be useful in the long term, how this fundamental science has the potential to lead to an application. And even if that's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years, that is outside the scope of the fellowship, how your research has the potential to change something that is useful for society, clinicians, etc. The application also have a section which is very important. We have the budget. Okay, it has been mentioned several times. This fellowship is great because it provides a lot of flexibility. It's generous budget with flexibility to be used, and it's important that you justify well what is the level of support that you need in your application. It's not good to see inflated application or also see applications where clearly the budget is not enough to do all the experimental work that is proposed. So there must be a balance between what you plan to do and the budget that you request. It's important that if this is the first time that, and even if it's not the first time, that you put together an important budget like this one, that you seek support from other colleagues. And that's why your supervisor, again, mentors, other senior colleagues are important. Something that we look as well quite in detail in the application are the letters of support. This shouldn't be just a letter saying, this is a great candidate, we give them our strong support. This is not just an admin formality. Letters of support are there because people have taken the time to think and to write the letter of support, to highlight which are the strengths, why not the weaknesses of the candidate, so that they are written with the confidence that when a reviewer reads the letter of support, they trust that there's been someone, the person writing the letter of recommendation, that really cares about this candidate and is really providing a strong letter of support, highlighting the merits and the background and the abilities and the skills of this candidate. So the letter of support or letter of recommendation, depending on who they are coming from, are really an important part of the application. I mean, it's included as an appendix, as an annex, but we as a committee, we like to go through them and to understand if supporters are really supporters and the recommendations are really there. So this is basically a short overview of how to write the application and the aspect that we believe are important. And then a few notes about the interview. Interviews are normally very stressful moments because in 30 minutes or a little bit more, you are in front of a panel of people that you've never met, and you have to really defend your proposal and your application. The interview is there to have a discussion with you. I mean, it's there to explore your science, to explore your ideas, to explore that you are the owner of what you have written in the application. And it's an opportunity for you to relax, enjoy the interview. It's one of the few opportunities to have in front of you 10 or 15 international scientists with different backgrounds who have really taken the time to read your proposal, think about your proposal, and ask questions that in most of the times they can only improve your science. So you have normally a few minutes to explain your project. It's important that you do that in a way that everybody in the room, everybody in the committee understand your science, understand your project, and highlight why is this novel, why is this important, why are you the one who is in the best position to develop this fellowship, this project. So you need to demonstrate that it's an ambitious but at the same time feasible proposal. Sometimes proposals are clearly over-ambitious, because in 5 years you can't really do everything. So the balance between a focused proposal and ambitious proposal is something that has to be well thought through. It's important, I mean, at the interview stage, you will have reviewers' comments. So it's important that you show, that you let the panel know that you have had the time to think about the reviewers' comment and that you have addressed them. And even if this involves changing some of the experimental plan, I think it's good to say that I have taken on board this reviewer comment, and I plan to modify my methodology in this way because I believe that this will really improve my proposal. So it's important that you acknowledge the reviewers' comments. It's important that you give time to the panel to ask as many questions as possible, so that you need to really answer the questions. You don't want to waffle and to give very general answers going through the field in general. You want to answer the question as sharp as possible. And basically, as I said at the beginning, it's an opportunity to demonstrate that you can have a scientific discussion, because this also gives confidence to the panel that you are in a position to achieve independence. So interviews are difficult for everybody. I have gone in my life through many interviews in both sides of the table. I have been interviewed for grants, and I interview people for grants, and I know that it's uncomfortable, but it's an opportunity to do that well. And the only way to do things well is normally through practice. So having what we call mock interviews with other colleagues, with senior colleagues, with your supervisor is important. You shouldn't go to the interview and the first time that you sit in front of a panel of people is that real moment. So practicing is important. So in summary, the early career fellowship is a complex proposal. It has many sections. You should take the time to complete all parts well, because otherwise it shows that you haven't put enough care in the application. You need to really get feedback from colleagues, and importantly, some people not necessarily in your field, scientists who should understand your proposal even if they are not doing exactly your research, and you should engage with your supervisor to write it. That makes a difference as well in many applications. So what is really important, I'm finishing my presentation as I started. It's important that you show that you can do excellent science. You as an applicant, that you own the idea and you have a background that will allow to develop that idea, and also that you have put care into writing the proposal and all the complexity that this involves as well. I know that it's not a very long presentation. It's difficult to tell how to write a good proposal in a few minutes, but I'm happy to answer questions now. If you have more questions about my presentation, I'm happy to answer questions as well by email, etc. If you have any specific question about what I have said, and that's it from my side. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Manuel, for guiding the participants through the grant writing process. You have touched upon most of the important points in such a short time. And I'm sure they will be much benefited, and they will have many questions for that. So now we can move on to the question and answer session. I would now request all the panelists, the other fellow speakers also switch on their cameras if possible, and I'll be asking the questions that they have. So many of you have already written your questions in the question box. If any of you still have anything else to ask, please do note it here. We'll try to take as many as possible in this time. So the first question is for Rahul. There's a question which says, is it possible to get fellowship if there is a gap of 3 years after PhD, career gap?
Okay, so I have been harping on the point that we are very flexible, and right at the beginning I said we give due consideration to non-academic or non-research career gaps. So yes, the answer is definitely yes. If you fulfill the other eligibility criteria, a 3 years gap will be accounted for, and provided that after considering those 3 years you would not exceed 4 years of post PhD experience. So for example, technically you are 7 years post PhD but have 3 years of gap. That will make you still eligible as 4 years. Yeah, I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you, Rahul. The next question is for Manuel. How do I fit the literature background, the project aims, methods, outcomes, all within to 2800 words? And how do I ensure that I'm not presenting too much or too little information?
Yes, that's a good question, and I think that having a limited space, it makes writing applications more challenging. It's just you need to be sure that you haven't missed any of the important references, and that's why having the opinion and having people going through your proposal is important, because you might miss an important reference, but if you have your supervisor, your mentor, and a couple of senior colleagues going through your proposal, the likelihood of missing important references is less. And that's also part of the skills of writing the application. And that's why adding references is not just to add the first reference, the first review that I think is I have found PubMed, but it needs some careful thought as well, which references are included.
Thank you, Manuel. The next question we have will be for Rituraj. This is something you have already touched upon, but still the question is that what considerations led you to choose your host institution for the fellowship? Any suggestions or anything?
So my proposal is basically a transitional. It combines both cell biology and mechanobiology. For that, I need to do interdisciplinary research, and my host institution provides infrastructure, and there are other colleagues here which are doing soft matter physics, for example. There are facilities which would help me in pursuing and carrying out my research, and I have all those facilities available in the host institution, and that's how I went on to choose this place as such. It combines basically cell biologists, genetic people from genetics background. There are physicists who could help me model or develop theories for whatever I'm going to do, and there are all sorts of microscope facilities available that I'll be eventually using in my proposed research to carry out this research. And keeping all this in mind was one of the reasons I chose this institute. And also, like, TIFR has a good reputation. It's a prestigious institute. It's a great place to be at and work. I hope I have answered my question.
Yes, thank you for that. Rahul, this question is for you. How can one demonstrate feasibility without having preliminary data?
So yeah, this is always very tricky. That we previous speakers, Manuel has said, it is important to demonstrate the the project has to be hypothesis driven, and it is always important to back it up with preliminary data. So but it may not be always possible to have those data ready as such. So in that case, a thorough literature review probably will be a good point to start with, where an exhaustive thought and a lot of thinking goes into preparing the research proposal using already available data from public platforms, or already published research could be very useful in this case, where you show that the hypothesis has merit and it has been demonstrated by other researchers as well. So that could be one of the uh, approach to go if you haven't done the experiment yourself. But I think that probably Manuel would be able to add further into that point, what one does without if he or she doesn't have the preliminary data from his own experiment.
Yeah, Rahul, I would simply add that I think if there is no preliminary data because you are, for example, moving into a new field, there is always a reason why you are well positioned to go into that field using your previous experience. So if any of your previous data, for example, might be techniques that are going to be applied into a new field, might be concepts that you have developed in a different field that you feel can be useful for the proposal that you are developing. If anything in your previous background, even if it's not pure pilot data supporting your hypothesis, can be useful to position you to tackle this project, I think that that's the place to include the data and to explain why this is relevant. This doesn't mean that you can include any sort of data as preliminary data. The data that you include as an annex has to be justified. But if you don't have done experiments in the aligned to exactly to the topic of your proposal, there's still a way that you can justify why am I good in a good position to tackle this project because I have done this in the past, and that similar techniques are going to be used to this, for example.
Thank you, Manuel and Rahul. I see that Shankar is back now. I hope the technical issue is resolved. We are talking about a very important topic about how the fellowship has helped you with attracting further attention to your research. So please shine
That's
some
right.
light.
My apologies for the glitch. I lost my connection for a while. So yes, indeed. So in fact, I would like to mention that I met a couple of other India Alliance fellows in one of the India Alliance annual fellows meetings and in subsequent meetings that were held abroad. And this has led to identification of a niche area which we are interested in. They are interested on the nutrition aspect, and I'm interested on the gut microbiota aspect. And this is kind of translated into now into a team science grant, which has now again been submitted to India Alliance for its review. So like that, there are several other examples with other India Alliance fellows as well. So these collaborations do work, and the networks that you build are really important in the long term to establish yourself as an independent researcher.
Thank you. Thank you. That answers his question. His or her question, I guess. So next question I can see is for Manuel. Why, is there any specific reason why the PhD institute might not be considered for ECF, even if it has like most of the required facilities?
Well, I think that maybe Rahul can afterwards add something else in terms of eligibility, but to continue your early career fellowship in exactly the same place where you did your PhD, there must be a very strong reason why that is the only place where you can develop this project, because otherwise there's going to be always a question about independence, whether someone can be independent just by developing a fellowship under the wings of the PhD supervisor. So unless there is a very clear technical reason, for example, I need this piece of equipment, and if you look at the country, this is the only place where I can do this research, and this is the research that I want to do because it's going to solve all these problems. And I think that has been considered in the past, but otherwise, I think that developing the proposal in the same institution where the PhD was done is not well received. Maybe Rahul wants to add something else.
No, thanks, Manuel. You have touched upon all the relevant points, but I would take this opportunity to drive home a very important message that the ECF fellowship strives to inculcate the value of independence in the researchers. So we generally tend to discourage continuing in the thesis environment. That's the technical term that we use. So we do not encourage you to stay in the same lab that you have done your PhD, unless there is a very solid compelling reason like Manuel has suggested, we do not recommend it, and it in most likely cases it is going to weaken your application in the whole cohort if you without any solid reason stay in the same thesis environment. So please keep that in mind and try to broaden your horizon or push yourself to find someone you haven't worked with earlier in your PhD thesis, so that way you become independent in your course of time, and also your chances of getting the fellowship increase. Thank you.
Thank you. I have many questions coming up. So another question for you, Rahul. So it says that can the applicant include their PhD supervisor or PhD lab as external sponsor or collaborators?
Yes, that is possible. You can add your PhD supervisor as external sponsor if the lab is situated somewhere else, for example, and there is no restrictions for adding your previous supervisor as a collaborator. We believe that sharing and interacting within research community is important, so that way you have the liberty of choosing your previous PhD supervisor as a collaborator. So we do not stop you from going to his or her lab as a external sponsor as well as a collaborator.
Thank you, Rahul. The next question would like to ask both Rituraj and Shankar. So the question is like, when you were applying, what was the nature and extent of support you received from the host institution during that phase?
Uh, so, as far as support from the host institution was concerned, while I was applying, I had so the sponsor comes, my fellowship sponsor comes from the host institution, is the director of the institution. They have provided me with the infrastructure that I need for my proposed research. And my fellowship supervisor's lab is here in this uh, institute. So basically, it kind of combined all the aspects, all the research aspects that I needed, as far as all the technical support that I needed from them was provided. As far as the management of the funding and everything was concerned, the host institution and the administration here provides a lot of support in that regard, I would say. And maybe Shankar can add more to this, as I've just started out my fellowship, pretty new to this.
Sure. Thanks, Rituraj. So basically, the host institution, I've been in two host institutions, activated my fellowship in VIT Bangalore. And I've had the exceptional support from both host institutions, in fact. And typically, it's when a fellow wants to move their fellowship to another host institution, not many institutions actually like that. So I was actually happy to have a very supportive fellowship supervisor in both institutions. And in terms of the host institution, again, any kind of support, any kind of academic research, or for that matter, we have time commitments with India Alliance, and those time commitments were actually honored by the host institutions in either cases. Apart from that, IIT Jodhpur as a host institution actually offers a startup grant for its faculty members with which they can set up their laboratories. So I've had really exceptional support from both host institutions, I would say.
Thank you, Rituraj and Shankar. So now the next question, I'll move to both Rahul and Manuel. You can answer this question. So it's asked if during the application phase, when we compare a fresher to an experienced postdoctorate, is the experienced postdoctorate more applicant more like preferred? Is there any kind of preference, or is it open like?
So we have a broad eligibility limits that within 1 year of finishing PhD to 4 years of post PhD. So that way, I would say someone with 4 years of postdoctoral experience probably will have more publications and more experience dealing with the grant. That way, it doesn't necessarily give one the added advantage. How it boils down to how one perceives the science, how one presents the project and performs in the interview. So from the selection point of view, I don't think we give undue weightage to someone with more experience as opposed to a fresher. So we are very fair in our selection process, but someone with more experience probably will have a lot going for them in terms of experience and that. So probably Manuel will have it to say because he is
Yeah, I agree with that, Rahul, that basically every candidate is assessed using their own career stage, and it's not the same someone who has just finished the PhD and someone who has 3 years of postdoctoral experience. I mean, the amount of papers that are expected, the quality of the research, so the panel has that in mind when the candidates are assessed. Having said this, I think it's important for each candidate to decide when is the best moment for them to submit their application, because there's only one opportunity. So when do you want to use that opportunity? Maybe it's not, you don't need to wait 4 years of postdoctoral experience, because it's not how many papers you have, how your proposal has the highest chance to be successful. But maybe many times, and I know this is a difficult piece of advice, many times you see, I mean, if I waited 1 more year, I could have published these 2 papers that I have now under review, and I could have done a few more experiments, and my proposal would be significantly stronger. And that's a personal decision. When am I in the best position to submit my proposal? But once the proposal is submitted, the panel takes into account the career stage to assess them.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions, but since we are nearing towards the end, so I will just take one more question. And so the last question is directed to Manuel. The question it asks, just a second. Okay, it asked that what mistakes should one avoid at the interview?
So a difficult question, but an important one. I think that general mistakes is giving a very long introduction to the field in the 5 minutes that you have to explain your proposal. You don't need to introduce the field. You need to use those minutes to introduce your ideas, your methodology. Then giving very long answers to questions, because that necessarily limits the number of questions that can be asked. These are 2 important aspects of the interview, and then I mean, it's not a mistake, but it's just a matter of not practicing the interview. I think practicing the interview is uncomfortable, but I mean, many of us have a lot of experience in panels, and we've been interviewed many times, and I know how uncomfortable it is to sit in front of a group of colleagues and pretend that you are interviewed, but that will make a strong difference in your real interview. So lack of practice, think well about your introduction, give specific answers to the questions that you are asked, so that the panel can say at the end, oh, they didn't answer any of the questions that we asked. So don't divert the question. If there is something that you really don't know, because you really don't know, and it's always better to say, I don't know the answer to that question, than pretend and to waffle around an answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your answers. I hope it helped a lot. So now we come to the close of the session. If there is anything anyone would like to add, I'd like to ask now. So if there's nothing else, then I will move to the end of the session. So all of you, I hope you found answers to many of your questions. Some of you probably the questions could not be addressed, but we tried to address the related questions here. If you still have any questions, please write to our email address that Rahul had also shared earlier, which is info@indiaalliance.org. Anyway, so I'll just repeat it. It's info@indiaalliance.org. Once you go to our website, also you'll find the relevant email IDs. So before I end, let me again remind you that the call for application of the early career fellowships in basic biomedical research is currently open, and the preliminary application deadline is 31st of August. We hope to receive all of your applications, and we wish you all the luck. We hope the webinar has helped you a lot in understanding the application process better. In case you still have questions, you can always mail to us, and we'll try to revert back to you as soon as possible. Also, we'd like to request you that once this webinar ends, you will be redirected to a quick survey. So please do take out a minute to provide your valuable feedback to us. It will help us improve in the future for such webinars. This brings us to an end. So I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today. Please do follow all our social media handles, and keep visiting the India Alliance website for more such programs. Please take care and stay safe. Thank you all. And a very warm thank you to all of the panelists, Manuel, Rahul, Rituraj, and Shankar from the India Alliance team for taking out so much of the valuable time to be here to just talk about their experiences in front of us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you
you.
so much.